issue, but we need to move on from that now. So I think I've made my points really. I just that there is an urgency, and I think there is to approach it on a case-by-case basis, but certainly to keep people and individuals in their family home is the most important thing that we can do for society at this point of view.
Thank you. Senator van Turnhout, you 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, and welcome, Minister, to the House. And I welcome your openness in your intervention at the beginning. And I'm certainly no expert on this subject, but I think it is an issue that goes to the heart of every household in Ireland, and therefore I feel it's actually a burden that we all have to share in finding a solution. And we have to work together. Certainly from my reading of the Keane report, it doesn't give us definitive solutions for distressed homeowners. In fact, it actually, for me, raises much more questions than it provides answers. And it also left me with a distinct feeling that the balance has been drawn very much in the favour of the banks. And that's why I do welcome that you say that we need to look at other solutions and other reports. I think, for me, it simply falls short of addressing the overall debt crisis, which is so desperately needed. But I have some specific questions, Minister, that I would like some clarification perhaps. And maybe firstly, the mortgage to rent schemes. It's been recommended as one of the tangible supports for distressed homeowners with unsustainable mortgages, the introduction of 2 mortgage to rent schemes, one of which envisages utilising an approved housing body, otherwise known as the Housing Association. And you've outlined it yourself that the idea would be for the housing associations to buy the property from the mortgage holder at a discount of the current market value. And I know the report doesn't set the level of discount, but if we take the equivalent scheme in the UK, it talks of 90% of the current market value of the property. The mortgage lender would provide a 75% long-term loan to the housing association secured on the property, while the Department of Environment, Community and Local Government would provide the remaining 25% equity. The mortgage holder would pay or part pay the mortgage with the proceeds of the sale. This would obviously involve some form of write-down of the outstanding mortgage, but the report does not specify whether the debt would simply be written off by the bank or if the mortgage holder would still be liable. And so perhaps, Minister, you could clarify that for me. The mortgage holder would stay in the property as a social housing tenant, paying a differential rent to the housing association, with the Department of the Environment paying up to 80% of the market rental to the housing association. And Minister, I do welcome your comments, but my concern with respect to the specific mortgage to rent option, which indeed forms part of my overarching concern that the report is limited in its recommendations and conclusions, which were, for me, partly arrived by the working group not consulting with wider representation of society, or indeed the organisations on the ground who would be responsible for actually implementing the recommendations, is that it places a considerable financial risk on the housing associations, who would have to borrow large amounts of money in order to run the scheme. So if the mortgage to rent scheme option is to become a reality, I believe it's imperative that a formal consultation process with the housing association sector is embarked upon first, and the sector is meaningfully involved in setting up the scheme. So I'm asking, can the Minister provide an assurance that such a formal consultation process will be adopted before the setting up of the scheme, given that the housing associations are effectively being asked to borrow money in order to remove large property debts from the balance sheets of the banks? I also share the concern of many who have already spoken on the recommendations, that they're very narrowly focused to effectively address, that they don't address necessarily the personal debt problem. That we're looking at housing and mortgage. And I think, as you've outlined yourself, Minister, we need a more holistic, all-debt approach, which recognises that mortgage arrears crisis is part of the overall personal debt crisis, which cripples tens of thousands of people. And I thought it was interesting when I was looking on the screens. I know we often say we're looking on the screens, but I was looking on the screens at the Committee on Finance and Public Expenditure and Reform last Wednesday, and it said that, MABS at that meeting said it cannot separate mortgage debt from other forms of personal debt, because 91.5% of people contacting their offices with mortgage debt concerns are also overwhelmed by personal and other household debts. And it's for that reason that MABS has suggested it be bolstered by the addition of 100 advisors instead of the creation of a 100 personal strong mortgage arrears agency proposed in the Keane report. So in ending, Minister, I suppose I would join with you in saying that we need to redouble our efforts. I think we all have to be part of finding a solution. I would ask and encourage you, Minister, to encourage all the relevant government departments to consider the 9 principles to overcome personal debt, which were pro-offered by FLAC and a number of other national frontline organisations who deal with mortgage arrears, personal debt, poverty and housing rights. And it should be viewed, I believe, as a useful framework to shape our policy response. The solution to the overall debt crisis will have to be arrived one way or another. And in the interest of cost effectiveness, both social and economic, I think, like all of us here, we need to arrive at it sooner rather than later. Thank you.
Senator Kelly, you have 5 minutes.
Leas-cathaoirleach.